Hi guys, in this video we'll be learning about CDN, which is Content Delivery Network. By the end of this video, you will be able to answer all these questions which I've mentioned over here. So let's get started. So assume that this is the server where you have deployed your full stack application, which consists of front end, back end, and database. All right. So obviously, this server will be receiving lots of requests from the users all over the world, right? By the way, I'm assuming that your application is famous and that's why it is receiving lots of requests. Okay. And most of this requests would be for static content like HTML, CSS, images, etc. So these are the static content which are updated rarely, right? You do not update your HTML every day, right? It would be once in a while. So that thing falls under static content. In dynamic content, you would be having HTML like dashboard. Okay, dashboard is different for each and every user. Okay, it is dynamically updated. Obviously, you are not changing the code every day, but dashboard might, let's say, show you your name, email, etc. Right? So it's dynamic. Okay, so this is dynamic HTML. This is static HTML. However, the point that I want to highlight is most of this requests would be for static content. Okay, but this server is processing all the requests, whether it is for static content or dynamic content. Okay, that's why this server will be facing lots of load. All right, this is the first problem which you are gonna face. The second problem is regarding latency. So over here, let's say that server is located over here in Mumbai. All right. So the users who are located nearby to Mumbai will obviously face less latency, like 20 ms. But all the users who are located far away, for example, this person who is located in US, will be facing higher latency, like this 250 ms. Right. So this is the second problem. We are facing these two problems because most of the request is for static content. All right. So what CDN does is it takes this static content and stores this static content nearby to your end users. So over here we have two things. One is edge server represented by yellow circle, and one is origin server represented by purple circle. So this is the server where your application has been deployed. Okay. Now what CDN does is it will take the static content from this server and it will put that content in the edge server over here, right? So now if anyone, for example, this user wants to get any static content, it will directly get that from the nearby edge server. Okay, this user will get that content from this edge server, this user from the nearby edge server. All right, so this is how the load on your origin server can be reduced to greater extent, right? So the first problem has been prevented. The second problem is latency problem, that is also resolved. Why? Because now if this user wants to get any static content, he or she can get that content from the nearby edge server. All right, so this is how CDN helps us to reduce the load as well as reduce the latency for the static content. Okay, point to highlight over here is it helps to reduce the latency for the static content. For the dynamic content, the request will directly go to the origin server. CDN will not help over here. Again, there are ways to improve that as well, but that is not a part of CDN. CDN only helps you to reduce the latency for static content. Okay, it only stores the static content. So now the question is how these edge servers get the static content. So basically we have two approaches for that. The first approach is pull based approach. So over here, assume that we have this image, lion image. Okay, for example, lion.png. Okay, so this is the image which is stored in your origin server. Now if any user tries to fetch the lion.png, their request will first go to the nearby edge server. All right. And since this nearby edge server does not have this lion.png, it will ask that from the origin server, and origin server will give that image to the edge server. Okay. And this edge server will return that image to the user who is asking for that image. For example, let's say this user. And this edge server will also cache this image over here in this particular server. Okay. So for the first time, this user will get the cache miss, meaning he tried to request the image from the edge server, but edge server was not having that image, and that's why this server requested that image from the origin server. So that time we would be having cache miss. But now if any other users who are located nearby to this edge server, if they try to fetch the lion.png, their request will first go to the edge server and they will directly be served from this particular server. Okay. So they will directly get this image from over here itself. Right. So this time the cache would be cache hit. So this is the pull based approach, and this is how the resource static content reaches your edge server over here, all the edge server. Okay. So this was first approach. The second approach is and by the way, this first approach is used widely. Okay. 99% of the time you would be seeing this first approach. And the second approach is push based approach. So over here, you yourself will push all the content to all the server. Okay. Whatever content you have, you would be pushing that to every edge server in the world or wherever you want. Okay. For example, let's say you are a game company and you are going to launch a game in, let's say, US. Okay. Over here you are going to launch a game. So what you would be doing is you would be pushing that game file, okay, new file, in this particular edge server. You yourself would be pushing that file over here, because now each and every user would be directly served from this particular edge server. The first user will not face any latency, but in this approach, the first user would be facing high latency, right? But as I said, most of the time you would be using pull based approach. Now let's take one scenario. Let's say I've updated this lion.png. Earlier it was looking something like this, but now it is looking something like this. Okay. But the problem is all these users, whenever they would be requesting for lion.png, their request will first go to this edge server, and this edge server will serve them this old image. This image would be served to the user who is requesting, and that is a problem. All of them are getting the old image. So how to make sure that all these users get the new image? So in order to serve the new image or new resource, we have to invalidate the cache. So there are 4 ways. The first one is purge. Purge means delete. So if I show you that on the Cloudflare, so by the way, Cloudflare is a CDN provider. So on Cloudflare, you can purge your resource, meaning all the resource which you have cached, like images, CSS, JavaScript, etc. You can delete all of them from the edge servers using this button. Okay. So this will basically delete all the resource which is present in all of your edge server. If you want to delete a specific resource, you can just go to this custom purge, then select the URL and just mention the link of that resource. Okay. Then you will be able to delete that particular resource. Right. Now let's try to understand this TTL and stale while revalidate. Okay. So over here, assume that this user tries to request for lion.png. In that case, the request will first go to this edge server, and this edge server will try to fetch that lion.png from this origin server. Okay. So from origin server, we would be getting this image. Apart from this image, we would be also getting one cache control header. In this cache control header, we would be having a max age of, let's say, 60 seconds or 300 seconds. So what does this mean? This means that for 300 seconds, whoever is trying to request for lion.png, they will directly get that image from this edge server, right? And let's say after 300 seconds, this user tries to fetch lion.png. In that case, the request will first go to this edge server. Edge server will notice that this request is after 300 seconds. All right. So it will make a call to this origin server to check whether lion.png has been updated or not. If it is not updated, well and good. If it is updated, it will bring the new image. Like over here, it was updated, right? So it would have brought new image over here. Okay. So it will bring that new image and start the counter again. Okay. That is again for the next 5 minutes, all the requests from these users will be getting this image, right? So the point that you should note over here is after 300 seconds, the request will first go to the edge server. Edge server will first check whether it is updated or not. If it is updated, bring that new image and then only give this image to this user. This user is basically blocked until this edge server revalidates this new image. Okay. But in stale while revalidate, that is SWR, we would also specify some timer over here. Let's say 30 seconds. So what is going to happen is, let's say this user requests for lion.png after 300 seconds. In that case, the request will first go to this edge server. Edge server will see that the header has SWR 30 seconds. Okay, so it will directly give this image. It will not block this user. It will give this stale image to this user. All right, for 30 seconds. And meanwhile, it will also start revalidation. All right, it will under the hood go to the origin server and try to check whether this image is updated or not. If it is updated, bring the new image. If it is not updated, well and good, right? While that revalidation happens, we or the edge server is still serving this old image. We are not blocking this user. Okay, so this is the subtle difference between the TTL, or you can say only using the max age versus using the combination of both of this thing. And generally, most of the time, you would be seeing the combination of both of the thing, because this thing prevents a problem called as thundering HUD. We'll be discussing about thundering HUD in some other video, but the thing is, you'll be using the combination of both of the things most of the time. And the fourth point is self-explanatory, because over here what you can do is you can just update the name of this image. Okay, so in that case, all the users will now try to fetch lion1.png, which is obviously not present in the edge server, right? So their request will first go to this edge server. Edge server will see that it is not present, so it will try to fetch this lion1.png over here, and this lion1.png will go over here. Okay, now all this user will get this image, right? So I hope now you understood all the ways of invalidating the cache. So one question that you might have is, why the request of a specific user goes to the nearby edge server? Why that request is not going to the edge server which is located elsewhere, right? This is one valid question. So the thing is, whenever any user tries to fetch any resource from this origin server, their request is first sent to the DNS server of the CDN. Okay, so the request first goes to the CDN's DNS server. This DNS server uses anycast routing. Through this, it will basically forward that request to one of this edge server. Okay, your request, let's say you are over here, your request can go to this server this server, this, or anywhere. It can go anywhere, okay? But generally, the edge server which can serve the request in lowest latency is chosen, okay? For example, this server can serve the request in 20 ms, hence this will be used, okay? But there can be scenario where, let's say, there is a lot of load on this server because lots of people are using or requesting to this server. So assume that this server is responding in 500 millisecond, and assume that this server can respond this user in, let's say, 100 millisecond. So in that case, the request from this user can go over here as well. All right. So the edge server is not chosen based on the distance. It is chosen based on the, you can say, latency. Whichever edge server can process the request in lowest latency is chosen, right? Once the edge server is chosen, either that edge server will process that request or it will forward that to the origin server, okay? So this is the entire flow.